Okay, so we're going to do our doodle landscape. And before you even get to this point, you should have created some different thumbnails of different landscape ideas and done at least 4 or 5 different practice Zentangles, because you're going to incorporate those into your landscape. The only thing I wanted to talk about before I get started is the reason that these look so cool when they're done, or any Zentangle design, is because of all of the principles of art that are incorporated into Zentangles, including repetition of line, variety of line. So repetition is just a repeated element. Variety is when you use thick and thin lines, different types of lines, like organic and geometric. Then the variety plus the repetition creates rhythm. And rhythm is just the way your eye moves across a piece of art, that keeps you engaged and interested. It adds visual interest to the piece of art. So we're also going to talk about what's called atmospheric perspective. And atmospheric perspective is when you create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. You can do it with color. Warmer colors tend to look more like they're in the foreground. Cooler colors look more like they're in the distance. Value, darker colors look more like they're in the foreground. Lighter colors look like they're in the distance. Size, overlapping, so these hills are overlapping. And size, things get smaller as they recede into the distance. There's a few other ones, but those are the main ones that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start filling each of my different landscape shapes, in my case hills, with different Zentangles. And I have different markers, different sized markers. You can also just use a Sharpie. You can use this kind of Sharpie and a thicker Sharpie if you want. So okay, so we have our doodle landscape done, and now we're going to add color, which is the most fun part. And you should have your watercolor palette already set up from previous lessons. I just have a variety of different brushes. Just kind of depends on what you're most comfortable with. And so what I wanted to talk about was atmospheric perspective with color. So like we talked about a little previously, the warmer is going to appear closer up. Cooler is going to seem like it's further away. And the value, so color has value as well. So the lighter value is going to appear like it's further in the distance, and the darker value is going to appear like it is closer up. So when you do watercolor, just wanted to quickly show you. Number one, the smooth side is the back, just to be sure, and then the more textured side is the front. Remember that watercolor is a transparent medium, so you're not going to want to lay on the paint really thick. If you do that, you're not going to be able to see all your beautiful designs. And trust me, my students create way better designs than I do. Like, they're probably laughing at me right now. But I have some students that just do some amazing Zentangles, and I'm sure you guys will do that as well. But so your paint should already be dry, which is going to help. Always use your watercolor dry. I have a couple of wet paints over here. They're like pink and violet and mauve, but these are already dry. And we've talked about color mixing. So basically what I want to do is I'm going to kind of try to create, most of this is going to be kind of oranges and mauves and pinks. Then I'm going to go to some yellows, and then to some violets, and then some phthalo blue, and maybe a little bit more mauve or something in the background. And when you paint, you kind of also want to follow the lines that you've created. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I will show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I have my red orange, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, before you do anything crazy, go ahead and just do a little test. Take some of your paint and double check and make sure that it is going to be light enough for you to see through. That looks good. And you guys, you can also do some mixing on the actual canvas or on the paper in this case. So I'll show you what that means here in a second. Let me get some of this orange down really quick. So while there's two different things you can do. You can do wet on wet, which we've already talked about in another lesson, but we could do wet on wet. You can also do wet on dry to build value. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some yellow on top of that, just to create a little bit more depth. Once your landscape is dry, you can come back in and darken up lines if you want, and just kind of do a little touch up. So one of the things that I see, just make sure it's dry before you start to do this. You can also come back in with paint and layer over it. Do some wet on dry, add some value if you want. like I said. I know yours is going to be way better than mine.